The Varnak warship drifted through the cold emptiness of space, its metallic surface glowing under the light of distant stars. Inside its vast corridors, soldiers in dark armor moved with discipline. They had fought for years against one enemy, the humans. The Varnak commanders said the humans were brutal, wild, and impossible to control. Every young soldier was taught that humans were a threat to all life. Among these soldiers was Liren, a young officer known for her loyalty and calm mind. She had never questioned her orders. She had never seen a human before. All she knew were stories of destruction, fire, and war. Now, standing in a dimly lit chamber deep inside the warship, she faced her first one. The prisoner was brought in under heavy guard. The soldiers pushed him forward roughly, chains clinking against the steel floor. The human's name was Mark. He stood taller than the Varnak soldiers. His face bruised and dirty, but his eyes steady. Liren had expected anger or fear. Instead, his expression was quiet, almost peaceful. It made her uneasy. The commander, a towering figure named Raxon, turned toward her. His voice was cold and sharp. "Officer Liren, you are assigned to end this prisoner's life. He is dangerous and must be eliminated immediately." Liren's chest tightened. She had executed prisoners before, but none of them were human. The room grew silent as everyone waited. The human met her eyes. "Do it quickly if you must," Mark said, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not afraid." His words hit her like a blade of ice. No one had ever spoken to her like that, without fear, without anger. Just truth. She raised her plasma weapon slowly. Her hands were steady, but her heart pounded hard. She had been told this creature was a monster, but standing here, she saw only a man. His face was tired, his body hurt, but there was something in his eyes that she could not explain. "Why did you attack our ships?" she asked quietly. She was not supposed to speak to prisoners. The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. He looked at her, surprised that she spoke. "We didn't attack first," he said. "You came to our colony. We defended ourselves." Liren frowned. That could not be true. Her people were explorers, not conquerors, or so she had been told. "You lie," she said softly, but her voice lacked strength. Mark shook his head. "You think I'm lying because that's what they want you to believe?" The commander's sharp voice broke the tension. "What are you waiting for, Liren? Finish it." Her finger hovered over the trigger. The energy in the weapon hummed softly. She tried to focus, but her thoughts refused to obey. She saw the bruise on his face, the cut on his arm, the exhaustion in his eyes. If he was truly a monster, why did he look so human, so alive, so broken? He met her gaze again. "You don't want to do this," he said. "I can see it." Her heart jumped. No one ever looked at her like that, as if he could see inside her mind. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She reminded herself of her duty, of her loyalty to the Dominion. But when she looked at Mark again, she saw something different, something she had never seen before, a strength that had nothing to do with power or weapons. "Enough hesitation," Commander Raxon shouted. He stepped closer. "Do your duty." Liren lifted the weapon higher. Her arm trembled. The hum grew louder. She aimed at his chest. Mark did not move. He simply stood there, his gaze fixed on hers. And then, as that small space of silence, something inside her broke. She lowered the weapon. Raxon's eyes widened in shock. "What are you doing?" he roared. Liren turned toward him. Her voice was firm now, though her heart was shaking. "He is unarmed. He cannot fight. This is not justice." Raxon raised his own blaster and pointed it at her. "Then you will die with him." Lorraine's pulse raced. Her training told her to obey, but her mind screamed no. In a moment that felt endless, she spun, aimed her plasma weapon at the control panel near the door, and fired. Sparks exploded, alarms blared, and the lights flickered red. "Run," she said to Mark. For a second, he looked stunned. Then he moved. The chains clanged as he followed her through the door. Slipping into the smoke-filled corridor, the sirens wailed across the ship. Voices shouted orders. Soldiers rushed to block the escape. Liren and Mark ducked behind a maintenance hatch. Her hands worked quickly, unlocking his cuffs with a stolen key. He rubbed his wrists and stared at her. "Why are you helping me?" Liren hesitated. She had no answer that made sense. "Because I saw the truth in your eyes," she said softly. They moved together down the narrow passageways. The floor shook beneath them as the ship's systems tried to seal the lockdown. Liren led the way, her mind racing. She had never betrayed her people before. Every step she took was another cut from the life she once knew. Mark followed quietly, his eyes sharp, scanning for guards. He seemed surprisingly calm for someone who had just escaped death. There was something steady about him, something that gave her a strange sense of safety, even in danger. At the end of the corridor, a heavy door blocked their path. Liren typed a code, but it flashed red. Denied. She tried again. But the system was already locking her out. "We need to go another way," she said. Mark studied the panel. "Move aside." He pressed his hands against the metal and began to pry at the edge. His strength was shocking. The Varnak were strong, but not like this. He managed to loosen the panel enough for her to slip through. They entered a dim storage bay filled with metal crates. Liren closed the hatch behind them. The sound of boots echoed faintly in the distance. She leaned against a wall, trying to breathe. Mark looked at her carefully. "You risked everything back there. You could have died." She shook her head. "I still might." He smiled faintly. "Then we better make it worth it." His calm voice steadied her. She realized she had just committed the greatest crime possible, helping the enemy. But somehow, she did not regret it. In the silence that followed, she studied him. Humans looked similar to her species, but there were differences: the shape of the eyes, the texture of the skin, the quiet warmth in his voice. He looked nothing like the monster her commanders described. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "You should hate us. You should want revenge." He looked at her with tired eyes. "Hate doesn't fix anything. I just want to live. I just want peace." His words stayed in her mind. She had heard many speeches about power and conquest, but never about peace. The intercom crackled through the ship. Raxon's voice thundered through the halls. "Liren has betrayed the Dominion. She is armed and dangerous. All units capture her and the human alive." Her breath caught. There was no turning back now. She looked at Mark. "We have to move." They ran between the rows of crates, searching for another exit. The ship shook again as the engines adjusted course. Mark noticed a maintenance ladder leading up toward the engine decks. "This way," he said. She hesitated. "That leads to the reactor." "It's dangerous." He gave a small grin. "Dangerous sounds better than captured." They climbed. Heat rose from the engines below, filling the narrow shaft with a dull roar. Lorraine's muscles ached, but she kept climbing. Mark stayed behind her, watching for soldiers. When they reached the upper deck, they found a small observation platform overlooking the stars. The view stretched endlessly, cold and beautiful. For a brief moment, Liren stopped and stared. She had lived her whole life in this vastness, but for the first time it felt uncertain. Mark stood beside her. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "If you turn back now, they might forgive you." She shook her head. "No, they will never forgive me. And I don't want forgiveness for doing what I believe is right." He nodded slowly. "Then we survived together." It was such a simple sentence, but it filled her with a strange warmth. She had never felt this kind of trust before. It was not from orders, not from loyalty. It was from something deeper. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. The soldiers had found them. Blaster fire cut through the air. Mark grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a wall. The shots burned through the metal where they had stood seconds earlier. He picked up a dropped rifle, checking the settings. "You can shoot," he asked. She nodded. "Yes. Then let's give them a reason to remember us." They fought together. She covered him as he advanced, and he shielded her when she reloaded. Their movements were unspoken, but perfectly timed. The soldiers fell back, shocked at their coordination. When the last guard dropped, silence filled the deck again. Liren lowered her weapon. Her hands trembled from adrenaline. Mark looked at her and smiled faintly. You're not bad for a Varnock, she gave a small laugh. And you're not bad for a human. For a second, the war, the danger, and the fear disappeared. Only two beings stood side by side against a galaxy that wanted them dead. The alarms continued to blare, reminding them that this was only the beginning. Liren knew they had little time. She turned toward Mark. There is a transport dock below. If we reach it, we can escape, he nodded. Lead the way. As they moved toward the hatch, Lorraine's heart beat fast. Not from fear, but from the strange thought that she had crossed a line she could never return from. She had spared the enemy. She had fought against her own kind. Yet deep inside, she felt free for the first time in her life. And beside her walked the human who had changed everything. The alarms screamed across the Varnak warship. Red lights flashed on every wall, turning the metallic corridors into rivers of chaos. Liren and Mark ran side by side, their footsteps echoing against the steel floor. Behind them, voices shouted commands and blasters fired down the hall. Liren felt the heat from one of the blasts pass close to her shoulder. She turned and fired back, her plasma shot hitting the wall near the soldiers, forcing them to take cover. Mark pulled her toward the right corridor where the lights were dimmer. "This way," he said. She followed, breathing hard. She was trained for battle, but this was different. This was not a mission. This was survival. Every second felt longer than an hour. They reached a sliding door at the end of the hall. It was locked. Liren opened a small panel and began typing in emergency codes. Her fingers moved quickly, her mind racing. "Can you open it?" Mark asked. "I'm trying," she said, frustration in her voice. "The system is locking everything." Mark looked around, searching for another path. The hallway was empty, but the sound of boots was growing closer. He clenched his fists, his breath steady. Then he noticed a small vent on the ceiling. "What about that?" he asked, pointing up. Liren glanced at it. "That leads to the waste shaft. It is dangerous." He gave her a quick look. Right. Less dangerous than getting caught. Before she could argue, he pulled himself up, using the broken edge of a wall panel as a foothold. He pushed open the vent cover, then reached down to help her up. She hesitated for a moment, then grabbed his hand. His grip was strong, pulling her up easily. The vent was narrow, barely wide enough for them to crawl. It smelled of metal and dust. Liren led the way through the twisting tunnel. Behind them, the soldiers entered the hall. One of them shouted. They went through the vents. Mark and Liren moved faster. The metal walls rattled as the ship's system shifted to battle mode. Liren could feel the vibrations through her hands and knees. After several minutes, they reached an opening that led into a dark chamber filled with glowing energy tubes. Liren dropped down first, landing quietly. Mark followed, landing beside her with a soft thud. "This is the secondary power core," she said. "We can reach the docking level through the maintenance shafts." Mark nodded. "Lead the way." They moved between the bright blue tubes that pulsed with energy. Lorraine's heart raced. She had never imagined she would be running through her own ship as a fugitive. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow looked like danger. Mark stayed close behind her. He was injured, but he didn't complain. He carried himself with a calm that confused her. Even now, hunted and wounded, he didn't lose focus. When they reached a service lift, Liren pressed her hand to the control pad. The lift doors opened with a soft hiss. They stepped inside, and the doors closed behind them. For a brief moment, there was silence. The lift hummed as it moved down. Mark leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. "You saved my life," he said quietly. Liren looked at him. "You do not need to thank me. I do not even know why I did it." He gave a small smile. "Did it because you knew it was wrong." His words hit something inside her. She turned away, pretending to check her weapon. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I am just tired of lies." The lift stopped with a jolt. The doors slid open. They stepped out into another hallway, this one quieter. Liren checked the map on the wall. "If we go left, we reach the hangar. There might be a shuttle there." Mark nodded. They started walking, but before they could take 10 steps, the sound of footsteps echoed from both ends of the hall. Trapped, Liren whispered. Mark looked around quickly. There was a side door with a warning sign. He opened it without hesitation. Inside was a small control room filled with blinking screens. They entered and locked the door behind them. Liren checked the control panel. They will break in soon, she said. Mark's eyes scanned the screens. One of them showed the docking bay. Several ships were ready, guarded by soldiers. He pointed. That's our way out. She shook her head. It is impossible. Too many guards. He looked at her calmly. Then we make it possible. The soldiers were trying to force it open. Liren grabbed her blaster and aimed at the entrance. Mark stepped closer to the control panel. His eyes moved across the system. He found a small section labeled Internal Doors. He pressed a few buttons. And suddenly, the entire corridor outside filled with thick smoke. The sound of confusion came from the soldiers. They cannot see us now, he said. Liren looked at him in surprise. You can use our system? I used to repair ships, he said with a faint smile. Machines are the same everywhere. She couldn't help but stare at him for a second. His confidence was unlike anything she had seen before. Then she nodded. Let's move. They slipped out into the smoke-filled corridor. The visibility was low, but Lorraine's visor helped her navigate. They moved silently, avoiding the voices of soldiers coughing and shouting. When they reached the corner, they saw the hangar. The large doors were open to space, with shield barriers holding the air inside. Dozens of ships were docked, but only a few small transports looked unguarded. Liren pointed toward one of them. That one! We can reach it. They crouched behind metal containers, moving slowly. Every sound made her heart beat faster. The hum of the engines, the clicking of weapons, the distant echo of footsteps, it all mixed into a tense rhythm. When they were halfway there, a soldier turned and saw them. Traitors! He shouted. The alarm started again. Blaster fire filled the air. Liren rolled behind a crate, returning fire. Mark grabbed a fallen rifle and joined her. Stay low, she said. He nodded, firing short bursts. He was fast, focused, precise. Liren was impressed. He fought like someone who had been through 100 battles. Yet there was no anger in him, only determination. They pushed forward, moving from cover to cover. Liren hit one of the guards, blocking their path. Mark covered her from behind, shooting at the control panels to block the incoming troops. Finally, they reached the small shuttle. Liren typed in her code, and the door opened. They rushed inside. Go, Mark said, slamming the door shut behind them. Liren jumped into the pilot's seat. Her hands flew over the controls. I am not sure it will fly. It was under repair. Will fly, Mark said firmly. It has to. She powered the engines. The hum grew louder as the shuttle came to life. The docking clamps released, and the small ship lifted from the floor. Outside, the hangar guards fired, but the energy shields of the shuttle held. Liren guided the ship toward the open barrier. A deep voice echoed through the ship's coms. It was Commander Raxon. Liren, you cannot escape. You are throwing away everything for a human. Return now, and I will spare your life. Lorraine's hands froze for a moment. Raxon had been her mentor, her commander, the voice she had obeyed for years. Mark looked at her. If you go back, they will kill you. You know that? She looked at him. His eyes were steady without fear. She turned back to the controls. I am not going back. The shuttle shot through the barrier and into open space. The stars stretched before them like rivers of light. Raxon's voice turned cold. Then you are an enemy of the Dominion. Communication cut off. Lyran exhaled slowly. We did it, she whispered. Mark leaned back in his seat, watching the stars. Not yet. They will follow us. She nodded. There is an old outpost near the shadow side of the moon. We can hide there. The shuttle sped away from the warship. Behind them, 2 fighters launched in pursuit. Lyran pushed the controls to full power. The engines roared. The ship shook as laser blasts missed them by inches. Can you hold it steady? Mark asked. Trying, she said through clenched teeth. He moved to the back of the cockpit and opened the weapon control system. I can shoot, he said. She nodded. Do it. He aimed at the fighters, waiting for the right moment. When one of them came close, he fired a precise shot. The enemy ship exploded in a flash of light. The second fighter pulled back. Lyran smiled faintly. You were good. He smiled back. You too. The shuttle entered the shadow of the nearby moon. The darkness covered them like a shield. The sensors showed no sign of pursuit. For the first time since the escape began, silence filled the cabin. Lyran leaned back in her seat, exhausted. Her hands were shaking. Mark sat beside her, looking out the window. The stars reflected in his eyes. She spoke softly. They will call me a traitor forever. He turned to her. Maybe. But you will also be remembered as someone who saw the truth. She looked at him for a long moment. Why are you like this? She asked. You were my enemy, yet you risked your life to protect me. He smiled slightly. Because that is what humans do. We protect those who protect us. His words filled her with warmth. She turned back to the stars. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never felt before: hope. The ship continued to glide through space. Heading toward the abandoned outpost that waited in the darkness, neither of them spoke again for a while. The war still raged behind them, but in that small shuttle, for one quiet moment, there was peace. The shuttle drifted silently through the shadowed space near the moon, its engines a low hum against the vast emptiness. Lyran sat in the pilot's seat, her hands gripping the controls, her mind alert. The warship was far behind them now, but she knew the Dominion would not stop. They had lost their prisoner and one of their officers, and they would hunt them without mercy. Mark sat beside her, quietly checking the rifle he had grabbed from the Varnak hangar. His face was calm, but Lyran could see the fatigue in his eyes. He had been through so much already, and yet he did not complain. His quiet confidence steadied her own nerves, and she found herself glancing at him often, trying to understand how he could remain so composed under such danger. We are almost at the base, Mark said, breaking the silence. It's an old outpost, mostly abandoned. They won't expect anyone to arrive. Lyran nodded. Good. We need cover, and we need time to plan. The shuttle descended into the craters of the moon, its shadow merging with the dark rocky surface. Dust and small rocks swirled beneath the engines as they approached the base. The structure was ancient, worn with rust, yet it stood strong. Lyran had never seen a human facility so isolated, yet functional. They landed on the outer platform, and the engines powered down. Lorraine's hands trembled slightly as she checked the locks on the shuttle. Mark stood and stretched his arms. Let's get inside before someone notices us, he said. The base entrance was a sliding door, slightly damaged but still functional. Lyran pressed the controls, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. They stepped inside, greeted by dim emergency lights and the quiet hum of long-unused machinery. This place is old, Lyran said, looking around. Why are you here? Mark's eyes scanned the hallways. It's safe. Few people know about it. I worked here before the war. I know the layout. We can hide here, fix the shuttle if needed, and plan our next move. Lyran followed him through narrow corridors. Every sound made her heart race. She had grown up in structured military life, and now she moved in hiding, feeling the weight of every step. The silence of the abandoned base was almost comforting. For the first time since her capture, she could breathe without alarms ringing in her ears. Mark stopped in a central control room. The walls were lined with screens and panels, some blinking weakly with residual power. He pressed a few buttons, and the lights stabilized. "This will be our base for now," he said. "We can monitor the Dominion from here, and it's shielded. They can't find us easily." Lyrian studied him. "You make it sound easy?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing is easy in war. But hiding is the first step to surviving." Hours passed as they settled in. Lyrian examined the room, discovering old maps, communication panels, and weapon supplies. Mark worked quietly at a terminal, accessing old systems and rerouting power to the base. He moved with calm efficiency, his mind clearly trained for problem-solving. Lyrian watched him and felt admiration she had never expected. "You're skilled," she said quietly. "I had to be," he replied. "We never knew when someone might come after us. Planning and thinking ahead keeps you alive." Lyrian nodded slowly. She had always relied on orders and rules. But here, survival meant thinking for herself, making choices that might defy everything she had been taught. And she realized how strange it felt to work alongside someone who was supposed to be her enemy, and yet was saving her life. As the night passed, they shared stories quietly, careful not to awaken the sensors that still ran silently. Mark spoke about Earth, about the human struggle to survive against the Dominion. Lyrian listened, slowly realizing that the truth of the war was far different from the propaganda she had grown up believing. Humans did not attack without reason. They defended themselves. They fought for survival, not for conquest. "You see," Mark said softly, "humans fight, yes, but we also care. We fight for each other. We protect those who cannot protect themselves." Lyrian nodded. "I thought all humans were ruthless killers. That is what my commanders taught me. Stories make soldiers obedient," he said. "But the truth is different. Look at what you did for me. You saw the truth yourself." Lyrian turned away, feeling the weight of his words. She had betrayed her own people to save a human, and yet she did not regret it. She felt a strange sense of freedom, mixed with fear of what the Dominion would do if they found her. The base suddenly shook as if a small tremor had struck the moon. Lorraine's eyes widened. "What was that?" Mark checked the sensors. "Nothing major. Possibly a small meteor strike. The base is old. Some parts shift occasionally." She nodded, but the momentary fear reminded her how fragile their safety was. Even in the shadows, danger could strike at any moment. Over the next day, they moved cautiously, exploring the base. Lyrian discovered old storage rooms with supplies they could use. Mark repaired communications and checked the defense systems. They worked together without speaking much, yet their coordination felt natural. At one point, Lyrian noticed him looking at her differently. Not as a human, not as an enemy, but with respect. She felt a warmth in her chest she could not explain. For the first time, she realized that connection could exist even across the boundaries of war. That evening, as they watched the stars through a small observation window, Mark spoke quietly. "You've changed everything, Lyrian. You could have followed orders, let me die, and returned to your people. But you chose differently." She looked at him. "I didn't know what to choose at first. But when I looked at you, I knew the truth. You are not what they said you were." He smiled faintly. "And you are not what your commanders say you are either. You chose life over obedience. That is more powerful than any weapon." The moment was interrupted by a distant signal on one of the repaired communication panels. Mark moved quickly to check it. A scrambled message was incoming, one that had clearly been relayed through multiple channels. He decoded it carefully, and his eyes widened. "They are searching for us. Not just the warship we escaped from. Entire fleets are looking for this base." Lyrian felt a chill run through her. "Then we are not safe here." "No," Mark said, "but we can delay them. We can use the base's old defenses to protect ourselves long enough to escape." Spent the next hours preparing. Lyrian learned quickly, following his instructions. They set traps, rerouted power to make the sensors look inactive, and created false signals to mislead the enemy. She marveled at how humans could improvise under pressure. The Dominion soldiers would expect a straightforward approach, but Mark had taught her to think differently. By the time the moon's long night ended, They had turned the abandoned base into a fortified hideout. It was not invincible, but it could hold off attacks long enough for them to escape or regroup. Mark leaned back against a console, breathing heavily. "Good work, Liren. You're learning fast." She smiled faintly. "I am learning from the best." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You've always had the ability. You just needed a reason to choose." Liren felt her chest tighten. His words felt like a quiet truth she had never admitted to herself. She had always followed rules, never thinking for herself. Now she was choosing. And in that choice, she felt alive in a way she had never known. The days passed quietly in the base. They shared meals from old rations, maintained the shuttle, and checked the sensors repeatedly. Each day, the bond between them grew. Liren realized that the man she was supposed to kill had become her companion, her ally, and perhaps something more she did not yet understand. One evening, while repairing part of the shuttle, Mark paused. "You've done more than survive. You've adapted. You think like a human now, in ways your people might never understand." She wiped sweat from her forehead. "It feels strange. I never knew life could feel like this free, even under danger." Mark smiled faintly. "That is what humans do. We find hope even in the darkest moments." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the base, feeling the emptiness of the moon around them. For a moment, it was peaceful. But both knew the Dominion would not give up. Liren looked at him. "We have to prepare. They will come." Mark nodded. "And when they do, we will be ready." She realized something in that moment. She had once braced for death at his hands. Now, she would fight alongside him to survive. She would stand with the human she was told to fear, against the very empire that raised her. And in the quiet of the abandoned moonbase, a bond formed that was stronger than fear, stronger than hate, and stronger than the war that raged across the stars. For the first time in her life, Liren understood that humanity's strength was not in weapons, ships, or armies. It was in choice, in courage, and in the refusal to give up hope. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The moonbase was quiet, but the tension in the air was thick. Liren moved cautiously along the corridor, checking the security monitors and sensors. Every sound echoed in the empty halls, a reminder that danger could arrive at any moment. She had fought beside Mark, and they had survived. But the war was far from over. Mark was in the communications room, working quietly at the terminals. His fingers moved quickly over the controls, accessing encrypted files left behind in the old systems. Liren watched him, intrigued by his calm efficiency. "You are very skilled," she said softly. He looked up and smiled faintly. "I learned quickly." "You have to when your life depends on it," she nodded, thinking of the Dominion soldiers who had chased them, the alarms, and the relentless orders she had once obeyed without question. She realized how much of her life had been shaped by rules and lies. "Mark," she said, her voice quieter now, "why do you help me? You could have left me to die. You are supposed to hate my people." He paused, looking at her with steady eyes. "Because that is not who I am. I fight for what is right, not for revenge, not for hate. I fight for survival and for the chance to live in peace." Liren felt something stir inside her. She had braced herself for death at his hands, expecting hatred, rage, and violence. Instead, she found understanding, strength, and calm. And she knew that the truth was not what she had been taught. Mark returned to the terminal and typed in a sequence that brought up holographic maps of the Dominion fleet. Liren leaned over to see the layout. Ships were spread across several sectors, scanning for survivors, but none had detected the moonbase yet. "They are organized," Liren said. "They know our tactics, but they still have not found us." Mark nodded. "They underestimate humans. They think we follow predictable patterns, but we adapt." He brought up a communication log intercepted from Dominion officers. Liren watched the words scroll across the screen. The Dominion claimed Earth was a threat, a species to be destroyed before it became powerful. But as Mark highlighted sections of the logs, she saw a different story. They are not telling the truth, Mark said. They claim humans attacked first, but the logs show the opposite. Dominion forces were the aggressors. They wanted Earth's resources and tried to conquer it, and humans only defended themselves. Lorraine's hands tightened into fists. Her entire life had been built on obedience, on believing the stories of her commanders. She had been taught that humans were violent and cruel. Yet here in these records, the truth was clear. Humans fought not for power, but for survival. They lie to everyone, she whispered. To their soldiers, to the galaxy. How could they control so many people with lies? Mark looked at her calmly. They rely on fear and propaganda. That is their power. But the truth is stronger. You saw it when you looked at me. Liren felt her chest tighten. She remembered the moment she had faced him with a weapon in her hands, ready to follow orders. She had braced for death, but his calm and courage had made her hesitate. She had seen his honesty, and for the first time, she had chosen life over orders. She turned to him. I don't understand. Why didn't anyone tell me the truth? Because the Dominion cannot afford it, Mark said softly. If soldiers know the truth, they might stop following orders. They might start thinking for themselves. Her thoughts raced. She had been one of those soldiers, blindly following commands, believing that humans were monsters. And yet, she had disobeyed. She had chosen to see the truth, to act on it. Mark continued to work at the terminals, pulling up more data. He highlighted records of attacks, showing how the Dominion had destroyed human colonies, taken prisoners, and spread fear across systems. Liren felt anger and shame, but also a strange sense of clarity. She understood now why she had been so unsettled when she faced him. You see, Mark said, humans are not what they told you. We do not fight for conquest. We fight to protect, to survive, and to build a future where life matters. Liren nodded slowly. I see it now. I cannot believe I was so blind. I followed orders without questioning. And for what? Lies. Mark turned to her, his gaze steady. You are not blind anymore. You chose differently, and that is what matters. Her heart beat faster as she realized the weight of her choice. She had betrayed the Dominion, helped a human, and now knew the truth of the war. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt free. They spent the next hours reviewing the Dominion's plans. Mark explained how their forces were spread thin, how their tactics relied on fear, and how humans used ingenuity and courage to survive against overwhelming odds. Liren listened carefully, absorbing every detail. This is remarkable, she said. Your people have survived against such odds. You are underestimated because you are human, yet your strength is incredible. That is what makes humans dangerous. We adapt, we endure, and we never give up. Even when the odds are against us, we find a way. Liren realized the truth of his words. She had been taught that humans were weak, violent, and chaotic, but now she saw that their strength was not in brute force. It was in resilience, in courage, and in the choice to survive against all odds. The day passed into night. The base quiet except for the hum of machinery and the occasional flicker of lights. Liren and Mark shared a simple meal, eating rations from the old storage rooms. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable. As they rested, Liren reflected on how much her life had changed. She had once believed in the Dominion without question. She had followed orders, prepared to execute a human, and braced for death. Now, she stood beside one, fighting for survival and truth. Mark looked at her quietly. You have courage, Liren. More than you realize. Courage is what humans respect. Not weapons, not ships, not armies. Courage and choice. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of gratitude, respect, and something she could not name. She had faced death at his hands, yet now she felt alive in a way she had never known. Suddenly, a faint signal appeared on one of the communication panels. Liren and Mark rushed to it. The message was from a small Varnock scouting ship, reporting the presence of the moon base. They have found us, Liren said, her voice tight. Mark analyzed the signal. Not exactly. They are close, but they do not know the full strength of the base. We can use this. Lorraine's heart raced. The Dominion would arrive soon, but now she had knowledge, allies, and courage. She understood the truth of the war, and she knew that humans fought not just with weapons, but with their hearts. Mark looked at her. We will need to move quickly. If we delay them long enough, we can escape, and maybe even turn the tide. Liren nodded. Then we prepare. They spent the next hours fortifying the base, setting traps, and rerouting systems to confuse the Dominion. Liren learned quickly, following Mark's instructions with precision. They worked silently, efficiently, and with growing trust in each other as dawn approached on the moon. Liren took a moment to look out at the stars. She had once braced for death at the hands of a human. Now, she stood beside one, armed with knowledge, courage, and the truth. The galaxy was wide, full of dangers, but also full of possibilities. Mark approached her quietly. You've changed everything, he said. Not just for yourself, but for all of us. Your choice matters more than you know. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. I didn't know I could make a choice like this. I thought I had to follow orders. But now, I know I can choose differently. And I will. Mark smiled faintly. That is what makes humans so feared and respected. We do not give up. We do not blindly follow. We choose. Liren felt a deep respect for him, for his people, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. The Dominion had underestimated humans, but now she understood why they should never do so together. They would face the coming storm. Together, they would survive. Together, they would show that courage, truth, and choice were stronger than fear, lies, and orders. And in that quiet, fortified base on the shadowed side of the moon, Liren knew that her life and the life of the human she had once braced to kill would never be the same again. Zara and Ryan crouched behind a ridge of jagged rocks, the alien forces advancing steadily toward the valley below. The wind carried a strange metallic smell, and distant thuds of energy weapons echoed through the canyon. Zara's heart pounded, not with fear but with determination. She had never felt this alive. Ryan glanced at her and nodded. We stick to the plan. Watch their patterns. Move when I signal. His calm voice steadied her nerves. She had learned to trust him completely. Every move he made seemed to anticipate the unpredictable. Humans were strange, she realized, in a way she had never seen. They seemed weaker at first glance, but they had a strength that came from thought, courage, and creativity. The alien troops marched with precision, their armor gleaming under the harsh light of the twin suns. Their leader, a tall figure with sharp features and a piercing gaze, barked commands. They believed Zara would be easy to reclaim. They underestimated the human beside her. Ryan gestured, and Zara understood immediately. She slipped down the ridge quietly, using the shadows and the uneven terrain to stay hidden. Ryan had taught her how to observe patterns, predict movements, and exploit weaknesses. She felt a thrill. This was not just survival. It was a chance to turn the tables. Suddenly, Ryan emerged from the ridge, firing a series of small precision energy shots at a supply cache nearby. The explosions startled the alien troops, scattering them and drawing their attention away from Zara. She sprinted forward, planting small devices along the alien path that Ryan had provided. Each device emitted a pulse that disrupted their energy weapons for a few critical seconds. Zara's species had always relied on brute force and strict tactics, but she was learning a new form of warfare. Humans did not rely on sheer numbers. They relied on unpredictability, strategy, and the courage to act when others hesitated. Every move she made felt exhilarating. She had expected fear to overwhelm her, but instead she felt alive, sharp, and unstoppable. The alien leader noticed the chaos and roared in anger. He advanced with a squad to confront Zara directly. She ducked behind cover, then rolled forward as the leader fired. Her human instincts, trained by Ryan, guided her perfectly. She maneuvered behind the leader's squad. Planting another device that disabled their weapons completely, Ryan joined her on the field. Moving with incredible speed and efficiency, together they created confusion among the alien ranks. Troops turned against one another, unsure of what was happening. Human ingenuity, she realized, was like a force of nature. It could not be predicted, and it could not be defeated by simple strength. Alone, Zara felt a surge of respect and awe for Ryan. She had once believed that humans were weak and fragile. Now she saw the truth. They could inspire fear and hope at the same time. They could turn impossible situations into victory. The battle raged around them, but Zara and Ryan moved with precision. Each step, each move, each device they planted created new opportunities. They lured the alien forces into traps, collapsed weak structures to block reinforcements, and disrupted communications. Every alien attack met a counterattack that came from a place the enemy could not anticipate at one point. Zara found herself face to face with a young alien soldier. He raised his weapon, fear flashing in his eyes. Zara hesitated, then remembered Ryan's words. Humans valued life, even in battle. She did not strike to kill. Instead, she disabled his weapon and pushed him to safety behind a rock. He stared at her in shock, unsure how she could show mercy in the middle of combat. Ryan watched from a short distance, approving silently. Zara understood that human strength was not just in clever tactics. It was in courage, compassion, and the ability to act morally, even under pressure. She felt a new sense of pride not in her own species, but in what humans could teach. Hours passed like moments. The alien leader, realizing that his forces were being outsmarted at every turn, tried a desperate frontal assault. Zara and Ryan anticipated this. They had set their final traps, guiding the leader and his squad into a narrow canyon where escape was impossible. The human strategy unfolded perfectly. Energy nets fell from above, blocking exits. Small but precise explosions disrupted communication and weaponry. Alien forces panicked, unable to organize. Zara moved through the chaos with Ryan, guiding disoriented soldiers away from danger without unnecessary harm. Finally, the alien leader faced Zara and Ryan directly. His pride and arrogance were evident in his posture. He believed he could still win. Ryan stepped forward calmly. It is over. You underestimated humans and their allies. There is another way. The alien leader snarled, but saw the truth. His forces were trapped, exhausted, and confused. He had no choice but to surrender. Zara stood beside Ryan, her breath steady, her heart racing. She had braced for death at his hands at the beginning, expecting the worst. Instead, she found herself witnessing strength she had never imagined. In the quiet that followed, Zara looked around. The battlefield was littered with disabled weapons and scattered troops, but there were no unnecessary casualties. Humans had fought smart, efficiently, and ethically. She felt a deep respect for Ryan and his species. Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. You see now, Zara, strength is more than size or power. It is thought, courage, and compassion. That is why humans endure, even when the odds are impossible. Zara nodded, understanding completely. She had learned a lesson that would change her forever. Humans were extraordinary, not because they were physically dominant, but because they could inspire, innovate, and act with integrity. The alien forces began to retreat under Zara's guidance. Some of her own species watched in disbelief as one human and one alien scout had outsmarted an entire army. Whispers spread among the ranks. Perhaps humans were not the weak, primitive beings they had assumed. Perhaps they were something more, something to respect, as the sun set over the valley. Painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, Zara stood with Ryan, side by side. She was breathless, not from fear, but from amazement. She had faced death, expected cruelty, and found strength, courage, and wisdom instead. In that moment, Zara realized the truth of what humans could achieve. They could survive, inspire, and change the course of events against impossible odds. And she would never underestimate them again. The human beside her, calm and resolute, smiled faintly. He had not only saved her life, but had changed her understanding of what strength truly meant. Together, they walked from the battlefield, leaving chaos behind and carrying a new hope forward, hope that humans, and those who believed in them, could achieve greatness even in the darkest moments. Zara knew one thing for certain. She would carry this lesson for the rest of her life. Humans were extraordinary, and she would never forget it.